Are you looking for a story? I'm Chase Glitch and I got one for you.
The day I met Anna was the best day of my life. I knew from the moment I met her that she was the one for me, the girl that I would spend my life with. I didn't have much money nor many things, yet I knew in my heart that I could make her happy. Anna was out of my league though. She was pretty, tall, blonde hair with blue eyes. I'm pushing 5'A" and my hair looks like I just woke up. It's dark black and my bangs cover my eyes. I can't remember the last time I went to the gym. I'm pushing 230 lbs solid. My refrigerator is filled with mostly beer and water. I work the overnight at the Marriott's front desk. Over the past couple years, I've seen a lot of freaks and geeks come in and out the hotel. I always just thought of it as a job though. Once I clocked out, I left all the madness behind. I never believed in ghosts and ghouls. They were always just stories to scare little kids to me. That was until I met a demon. I started to believe then. It was a normal Friday night, nothing out the ordinary. One or two drunk guests going in and out the lobby. I got bored as I normally do and decided to go on my security walk, which I usually do just to keep myself awake. Our hotel only has 5 floors, so there isn't much of a walk. I start on the first, checking both exit doors, then make my way up. When I got to the second floor, landing in the stairwell, I heard a girl yell, "Leave me alone." Looking down the hall, I saw 2 people running to the other stairwell. At first I wasn't alarmed. Over the years I've seen my share of lover quarrels. Hell, I've even had to intervene in 1 or 2, so I thought nothing of it. By the time I got halfway down the hall, a man's voice boomed, "You will be mine forever." It shook the hotel a little bit. At first I didn't know what to do. I just stood in the hallway watching and waiting to see if any other guest would come out, if maybe it was just a coincidence. When he yelled, it felt as if we had a tremor. I said, "Leave me alone." I heard the girl yell again, then footsteps down the hall. They were right above me. Immediately I sprang into action. I ran back down the hall to the stairwell. As if the devil was on my heels, I ran up the flight of steps. When I got to the 3rd floor, I heard a door slam and someone started banging on the door. I paused for a second to gather myself. This guy sounded big, but I was ready. Once I mentioned the cops, guys usually calmed down. When I stepped into the hallway, what I saw was not a simple quarrel. A man stood in front of the doorway, banging with all his might. Every pound made the hallway shake. He looked like the normal overgrown muscle jerk with an anger problem. "Hey, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the hotel." He turned to me and we made eye contact. His eyes were not normal, they burned red with fire. Big boils covered his face. When he opened his mouth, it looked as if he had but 1 or 2 good teeth left. I felt repulsed just looking at him, even before the smell hit me. The hallway now smelled like rancid milk. The smell came out of nowhere, it just seemed to overtake me. I could almost feel it on my skin. It felt cold and slimy like milk would be. It made my stomach turn over. I stood my ground and repeated myself. "Stay out of this," the guy said. The whole hallway seemed to tremble by his voice. Spit shot out of his mouth. It oozed down his face, making a trail on the floor. I was disgusted by him and confused. Something in me, though, pushed me to confront him. I took 2 steps closer to him and pulled out the hotel phone. I repeated myself again with a more stern voice. Before I could finish my sentence, the creep punched me in my face, then gave me a left to the chest. I hit the floor and the front desk phone went flying. He picked me up and threw me back down the hallway. I crashed into the wooden table, smashing it and the vase on top of it. A few guests came out hearing the commotion. "Call the police," I yelled to an older gentleman. I looked back and the guy was gone. The smell had disappeared. The girl was no longer crying. The hallway was just eerily quiet. A hand grabbed my shoulder and I almost jumped out my skin. It was a guest trying to help me up. She was an older black lady, maybe in her 40s or early 50s. A few gray patches stood out in her hair. She looked really concerned for me. An older white lady stood behind her. Around the same age, they probably were traveling together. "Are you all right, young man?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Did you see where that guy went?" "What guy?" "You were the only one out here." When we heard the crash, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Without responding, I jumped up and ran to room 369. I knocked on the door, not too hard but with enough authority to get a response. "Guest services." I've called the police, it's safe to come out, no answer. The guests in the hallway are starting to look at me. A small crowd had formed by the broken table before I knew it. They were all whispering about what happened, what they heard, what they saw. I knocked again, this time with more authority. Guest services, I'm coming in. No answer. I opened the door and entered the darkness. I cut on the light switch and was even more baffled by what I saw. The room was completely empty. It was vacant, ready, and void of life. Not even a towel was out of place. No sign of a lover's quarrel or even a guest. I backed out the room that now had about 10 people, looking in from the doorway like the paparazzi. I'm sorry for the disturbance. You can return to your rooms. If the police have any questions, they will call your room phone. Slowly, they all shuffled back to their rooms. I stood in the hallway and waited for a moment, running the incident through my head. The eerie silence had set back in. It felt as if someone was watching me. I looked down the corridor and then to the other. I was alone and confused in the third-floor lobby. The phone rang and I ran to find it. It had flew somewhere during the struggle. I found it in front of the laundry chute door. Answer, and I sounding all out of breath. It was the cops. I told them I'll be right down as I got on the elevator. I realized I hadn't called my boss. It was 4 a.m. He was going to kill me. I called him quick on my cell phone. No answer as expected, thankfully. I left a voicemail and assured him everything was under control. My nose began to bleed as I let the cops in. I told them I didn't need medical help, grabbed some tissues and plugged it up, so to speak. I ran them through what happened, going through the database for them. It began to make less sense. No one was supposed to be in that room. It was vacant, ready, just like I found it. I took the cops upstairs and showed them the table. They began to question me, asking me about what I was doing before it happened. Did I drink? It's a Friday night, maybe you had a couple on this late shift. Something happened, you trying to cover it up. Filing a false police report is a crime too, so I just busted my face and cut up my back to file a false police report. I'm not saying all off that. I'm saying the facts don't add up. The only person to see the guy is you. The only person to hear the girl scream is you. Then you telling me there was an earthquake earlier this night. Kid, I've been doing this job a lot of years. Stay off the drugs. I would arrest you now for wasting my time, but I'm sure your boss will do the right thing. By the next morning, my boss was giving me an earful. On not one of our cameras did they see a couple. All they saw was me running around the hotel, then flying into the table, which that fact alone stopped my boss from firing me. He had to admit something threw me into that table. His final decision was I take some time off, clear my head of the situation. After about 2 weeks, I felt I was ready to return back to work. The first night went by without a hitch. The second night, though, once the hotel lobby quieted down, the phone started to ring. I answered and it was silent. It sounded as if someone was just breathing on the other end. I hung up and shook it off. It's not the first time people have played on the hotel phone. The next 30 minutes, though, the phone didn't stop ringing. Every time I answered, it was the same thing. Finally, I looked at the caller ID, something I should have did 20 minutes prior. Yet I was trying to convince myself it wasn't what I thought. Looking at it now, I wish that I was right. The phone was being called from room 369. I didn't answer it this time. I grabbed up my keys and went upstairs. I took the elevator up to give myself a second. My nerves were starting to twitch. What was I going to find in the third floor tonight? Would that guy be back again? My face began to hurt thinking about him hitting me again. The elevator stopped on the floor with a thud. I took a deep breath and stepped off. Walking down the hall, I finally stood in front of room 369. My palms were sweaty and my mind was racing. Before I could knock, the door slowly swung open. Normally, that would have been enough for me to turn and run. Yet I walked in, call it curiosity or stupidity. Once again, I was standing in room 369. This time, though, a young woman sat on the bed. She smiled and motioned me over. Something felt out of place with her. She wore a plaid shirt with jean short shorts. No one wears plaid anymore. Great, this is the reason I never get laid. I got a sexy girl taking to me. I'm here critiquing her outdated wardrobe, as if I'm done fashion expert or even into fashion at that. I paused for a minute, not sure what to do. Are you going to just stand there all night?" Anna said. I didn't know what to say, so I walked over and sat on the king-size bed. She was watching NBC to catch a predator. Chris Hansen was just walking out to address the predator. So why were you calling the phone and not saying anything? I'm really shy. I didn't know what to say. I could understand that. Was it you with that guy here a few weeks ago? Yes, that was my ex. He doesn't understand. It's over. He almost broke my arm and got me fired. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get you in trouble. We sat in silence for a minute. Then I asked her, "What's your zodiac sign?" She was a Scorpio and I'm a Sagittarius. We talked nonstop for the next 2 hours. Before I knew it, we were kissing and making out. Her bra came off and exposed the supple breasts she had. They were about a C-cup and perky, with a small pink areola. It's been so long since I've been with a girl. I was trying not to rush or be too aggressive. It seemed that she was ready for me. Her vagina was so wet and hot, it felt perfect. Anna moaned my name as I entered her. Before long, I was laying next to Anna, holding her in my arms. I drifted to sleep and was awoken by the hotel phone. People were downstairs trying to get in. I jumped up and looked around the room. I was completely by myself, standing in room 369 once again in the dark and alone. I checked the bathroom, but Anna was nowhere in sight. I threw my clothes on and ran downstairs, letting the guest in and apologizing for their wait. I checked them in and got breakfast ready. In the nick of time before my boss walked in, I was at the desk awaiting the guest for the morning who would check out. Curiosity began to overwhelm me as I stood at the computer. I looked up Anna's room number. What the screen said again gave me an uneasy feeling in my stomach. The room was vacant, empty. I checked the records. No one has stayed in that room for weeks. How did Anna get in there? Where did she go again? Questions buzzed around my head. I knocked on my boss's office door. He opened it with his cup of coffee still in hand. I questioned him about room 369. He gave me a look for disappointment and shock. I'm sure he expected this ordeal with the room to be over. What's your fascination with this room? I met a girl in it last night, yet when I looked at the records, there is no one assigned to that room. Come in my office for a moment. My boss sat in his chair behind his desk. I sat in front of his desk and awaited what he had to say. What he told me not only shocked me, it made my stomach feel worse than before 10 years ago when he was just a desk attendant like me. There was a fire at the Marriott. A young girl and her boyfriend were staying in room 369. They were apparently arguing that night. The girl kicked him out and thought he left. Her boyfriend came back an hour later. He doused the third floor with gasoline, making sure to especially cover her room door and the walkway in front. The girl was trapped along with a few other guests. They burned alive in their rooms that night. The boyfriend, trying to make a quick escape, didn't realize his shoes were wet. He slipped and fell down the third floor steps. The fall broke his neck, killing him that night too. Since then, I'm not the only attendant over the years to see or hear strange things on the third floor. I hope that helps. If I was you, I would ignore everything I see and hear up there. I thanked my boss for letting me know. I got up out the chair and walked out his office calmly. Before I knew it, I was running down the halls of the Marriott. Within a minute, I was standing at room 369. I used my master key and opened the door. It was empty as before, and once again, I was in the dark and alone in room 369.